Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Sham Sankar, CTO of Palantir. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. Okay, folks, not. We don't want to see anybody leaving. This is the last speaker of the day. We're going to bring it home strong. We are about to introduce Blake Hall, the CEO of ID.me, onto the stage. A big brother of mine, a mentor of mine, somebody who is critically important to showing just what veterans are possible as entrepreneurs in this day and age, at this moment in time, and everything we've talked about today. So folks, please, warm welcome for Blake Hall, CEO of ID.me, and then no manifesto from me. We're going to go party and hang out, and that is it. Thank you.
What's up, buddy? Always rough to be the last speaker between everyone in the bar, so I'll try not to be boring. I wanted to talk to you all today about leadership in service and about my journey as both a soldier and now as an entrepreneur. And, you know, folks have different definitions of what leadership is. To me, the core definition of leadership is to inspire others. And that's true at the personal level. We've all been around inspiring leaders. It's true at the company level, where there are missions that inspire a team into a joint cause. It's also true at the country level when we talk about American values. The best missions engender a commitment to service. And with service comes sacrifice and grit and staying the course for things that matter. And so I want to talk a little bit about what America has meant to me and to my family. There's a poem at Ellis Island, and part of it reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." General MacArthur had a similar quote. He said, "The soldier, be he friend or foe, is charged with the protection of the weak and the unarmed. It is the very essence and reason for his being." And I don't know about you, but I find that very inspiring. I think America is a unique country, and that literally written into the Statue of Liberty is a commitment to the most vulnerable populations as long as they share our values, and a commitment to freedom and to the American way of life. Now, I'm a third generation soldier. My grandfather was a command sergeant major. He ended up 66 months in combat. He landed at Anzio as a Browning automatic rifleman when he was 17 years old. He fought his way up through the Alps, stood guard on the Rhine when Germany surrendered, then fought in Korea and 2 tours in Vietnam. My father retired as a brigade commander after 30 years of service and led an MLRS brigade at Fort Sill. My grandfather had 3 rules. And I'm sorry too, he was decorated with the Bronze Star for heroism at Saint-Étienne in France. His battalion was about to be overrun, and he crawled out in front of 3 German machine gun nests and spliced the lines so the forward observer could call in artillery to beat back the Nazi assault. And that was a Bronze Star in World War II. Probably be a different medal today. He had 3 rules. The first rule for leadership was never think you're better than the men that you lead. And that was because my father, when he was being commissioned as an officer at West Point, he wanted him to respect and never think that his title as an officer made him different for the folks that he led. The second rule was, if you have a choice of the unit that you go to the one with the worst reputation so that you can see the difference that good leadership makes. And his third rule, which I'm going to translate, was never let your name get associated with S4, which is supply. And that was because of a very personal experience where he was in the Alps and everyone was getting frostbite. And he was sent on a detail back to the rear. And as they got farther and farther back, they started to see gloves and fur-lined parkas until they were finally back at headquarters, where all the best cold weather gear was with the guys in the rear. And meanwhile, on the front lines, his brothers were getting frostbite. And so I translate that rule into meaning make sure that you take care of those who need it the most first. And that's really what leadership is about, servant leadership. Now, 9/11 changed the arc of my life. I was at Vanderbilt University in the ROTC program, was going to serve, but didn't know that I was going to serve in wartime until that happened. And My mom's dad, my grandfather on that side, she's from Queens, and so I'd grown up around New York City and the Twin Towers. And at that moment when I knew that I was going to lead young men into combat, I knew that I wanted to be an Army Ranger. And I also knew that I needed to dedicate myself to be credible in order to be worthy of leading them when I was only 23 years old. I was just listening to an interview with Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, and he made a comment that is full of wisdom and truth. And his comment about leadership is, you cannot delegate understanding. You can't delegate understanding. And what he meant was, you can't lead what you don't know. And the reason that you can't lead what you don't know is that you can't manage if you don't know what good looks like. And you can't be credible if you're not good. Now, years later, when I was at Harvard Business School, I had the privilege of listening to Clayton Christensen talk. He passed away a few years ago, and at that time he'd been diagnosed with cancer and had been given a very low probability to live. He ended up living about 8 or 9 years more. But he relayed this story where he went across the river to Harvard University, and he was talking to 6 PhD candidates in philosophy. And he asked all of them to define humility. And so they went away into their different corners for about half an hour, worked alone. And when they came back, none of them had defined humility as modesty or as self-deprecation. All the definitions were a derivative of confidence, that you have to be confident in order to be quiet and to be still. And that immediately rang true to me, that the best people who are the most competent don't need to tell other people how good they are. They know that they're good. And that inner confidence and security allows you to be a better leader with less ego and to listen. And so at 23 years old, knowing that I was going to lead an infantry platoon, that meant I needed to be Ranger qualified, airborne qualified, and I needed to have my expert infantryman's badge. Prior to going into Ranger School, my dad served with the former commander of Delta Force, and he said, "Do you have any advice for my son before he goes into Ranger School?" And he said, "Tell him not to go in the wintertime." So, of course, my report date was January 10th. Now, while I was in mountain phase of Ranger School, I had interaction with a Ranger instructor named Sergeant First Class Schultz, who had an indelible impact on my life. Sergeant First Class Schultz was different. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He was a great teacher. And so right before my patrol as a platoon leader, I was talking to him and I said, "Sergeant Schultz, I've learned more from you than any other Ranger instructor. You don't act like the other ones." I was like, "Why?" And he just looked at me in the eye and he goes, "Ranger, never mistake my kindness for weakness." I found out later he had the lowest pass rate, the lowest go rate of any Ranger instructor in mountain phase. An amazing teacher, kind, but not weak, the toughest one. I got my go from him in mountain phase. It's one of the most proud accomplishments I have in my life. But that stayed with me. I think you've got different models of leadership. You've got Bobby Knight, you've got Coach K. Both are remarkably effective, Hall of Fame leaders, but they did it in different ways. And I think the best leaders can do it with kindness without being weak, and I've kept that with me. The second thing that Ranger School did for me is it was really a rite of passage into manhood. It teaches you about grit and commitment to that mission so that you can earn the right to be credible when you're too young to get it through experience or skills or any other way. And there was a moment when I was about to jump into to swamp phase outside of Destin, Florida, where I was miserable. I went in at 195 pounds, ended up graduating at 162. I had poison ivy all over my body and bronchitis. And I remember watching for the light to turn green that I did not care whether or not my parachute opened or not when I left the door. I was that miserable. But at that moment, I realized that I would literally die before I quit. And that gift that Ranger School taught me about myself about my commitment to mission allowed me to be a better leader and to be credible with my men at the same time, that outward badge that is a Ranger tab. Now, I'm not fully certain that I earned it all myself. I had gained a reputation for an Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation that followed me around, and so it was very hard for me to get in trouble at Ranger School. They have this round robin with your weapons, and my weapon was clean, but the weapon I inherited, a squad automatic machine gun, the feed tray was filthy, and so the Ranger instructor got in front of me, and I had opened up the feed tray, and he goes, "Ranger Hall, why is your weapon filthy?" And I was like, "I don't know, all of my kills were close combat. Somebody else must have not properly maintained it while I was choking out the enemy." And he goes, "Okay," and then leaves. And so I'm not sure if it's that or if I actually passed, but either way, I got through. The first platoon that I took over, I had the great fortune to follow a platoon leader who was a jerk. He didn't respect the guys, and if you've ever followed a jerk and you've been a leader of that team, you can be normal and be a hero, and that's exactly the gift that guy gave to me. We had this guy, Hernandez, that he called Hernando, and I was like, "Sean, why do you call him Hernando if he hates it? Why don't you just call him Hernandez?" He's like, "Well, because I can." And so like the first day that I took over, I was like, "Hernandez," and he's like, "Oh, thank God." So it wasn't hard, but just by caring and respecting and living rule number 2 of what my grandfather said, never think that you're better than the men that you lead, it earned me instant credibility and respect. And about a week later, as I was letting these guys do their job and not micromanaging them, one of the wives came in, Sergeant Koryavik's wife, and she looked at me and she said, "So you're the man who's made my husband so happy to come to work over the last few weeks." And I think that's what good leadership does, is it inspires and it empowers people where they're able to be productive and to feel cared for and also given the tools that they need to succeed. Now, that platoon was 13th out of 14th on the last live fire exercise when I took it over. And the next time we went around, we were 1 out of 14. And so I had a mentor, Colonel Barry Huggins, who took a bet on me. And there are folks in your life that will take bets on you, some big, some small. It's really important that you come through for them. So Colonel Huggins made me his recon platoon leader after 5 months as a rifle PL over a cohort of lieutenants who were a year senior to me. Did not make me the most popular guy in the battalion. And I took over a reconnaissance platoon of scouts and snipers. Now, the actual problem for that platoon was a little bit different. It wasn't about a leader who was treating folks in a way that was disrespectful. It was more about a culture of entitlement. And so with that unit, I had to focus more on just enforcing the basics. They thought that because they were scouts, they were better than everyone else. And in fact, I had to teach them that you actually need to lead by example to be worthy of the honor of what it meant to be a scout. And I knew when I heard a corporal correct a sergeant as I was walking by a room and he said, "Tuck your shirt in, we're scouts, we're better than that I'd turned around that culture. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but those basics of setting standards, what some people call picking up trash, they really matter. They matter a lot. If you let that stuff slide, it becomes really difficult to get people to care about the details, and you really need to be in the details in order to be good over time. So we deployed to Iraq in July of 2006. And 2 weeks before we were going into combat in Mosul, Iraq, we had some 3-letter agencies come in. They said, "Hey, guys, you're not going to do traditional reconnaissance and precision engagement. We're going to put signal intelligence assets into your truck, NSA assets, and you're going to begin to run kill-capture missions with a 20-minute string, day or night, where from time of alert, you're rolling outside of the wire." So we had to completely relearn everything with about 2 minutes of lead time, very similar to entrepreneurship. A new mission, same team, but the problem completely changed. It was a bit of a pivot in military terms. When when I got to Mosul, the first thing that I did, I remember on Fob Merez, there's a hill that you can walk up to that overlooks the east and the west bank. And I got down on my knees, and there's a verse, Isaiah 54, that says, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." And I said, God, I claim this promise for my men. And he was really good to me over the next 15 months, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Now, before we deployed, I wanted to make sure that my team was psychologically resilient. I took them on a run, and we would typically go 7 to 9 miles. We would run, a 6 to 6:30 pace throughout this whole thing. And I said, on this run, instead of stopping where we normally stop, I'm going to take them 400 meters farther. I'm going to run right through where we normally finish. And when we did that, within 100 meters, half of my guys fell out. Half of them fell out after running 9 miles. And I was like, I'm only taking you a few hundred meters farther. They didn't know that at the time. But you could see that when, as humans, we think the finish line is here and then it's not there, the goalposts move, how demoralizing it is. On the 12th of October in 2006, we were leaving Fob Merez on a route called Dogleg, because it looked like a dogleg, 9-degree turn up. It was our second patrol of the day. We were tired. I remember being exhausted. Sundown, circadian rhythm slow. 24 guys in that patrol. And as we go out, the combat support hospital begins to take battery fire. And I'm the son of an artilleryman. And this is crazy. This is October of 2006. Boom, 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 boom. 20-second pause. Boom, 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 boom. So time on target, battery fire. A few things. I'd listened to my guys, and they said, sir, when they shoot, they like to fire max range and line of sight. And so later, my snipers told me they thought I was full of shit. But I traced an arc from where we were at, because we were maybe 200 meters away from the support hospital when those rounds were hitting. And there were two fields that were about 6 kilometers out that had direct line of sight to the base. And I picked the southern one. And I said, I think I know where they're at. Everyone get down, let's go. A vehicle bomb went off behind us. About 100 fighters stormed the alley and attacked the base. In fact, as we were crossing from west to east Mosul on the top, you could see every single base in the entire city under fire. It looked like Star Wars, where the red and the green tracers were just bouncing off into the air. And we made a turn to that southern field, and I got a grid from the battalion headquarters. My call sign was Lightning 6, and then Patriot X-ray. I said, Lightning 6, Q36 grid follows. I'm like, send it. It was right in the middle of this circle that I had drawn on the map. And it's because I listened to the guys who'd been on the deployment the year before. Now, we ended up cresting a berm, destroyed 382 millimeter mortar tubes, 120. Those guys were still carrying shells as we came up on top of that. They were only able to fire a third of their rounds. We ended up in an hours-long firefight, no close air support, no quick reaction force, everybody pinned down. And for me, one of the proudest moments of my life, just watching those guys fight. We ended up, there were 10 urgent casualties on the base. And when we got back, the battalion commander said, it's pretty simple. A third of the rounds fired, 10 casualties. Tell your guys they just saved about 20 American lives with what they did. And as a team, that's what we did together. There were 3 Bronze Stars, I think 10 ARCOM Vs for that firefight. I don't talk about it too much, but I'm super, super proud of them and what it means to be on a team. Now, one of the reasons that we were able to perform at such a high level is that we made little incremental improvements together as a group every day. So with our core mission, the theater average success rate for these kill capture missions was about 40%. We were about 23% when we started, so we were terrible. But we kept getting better, And by month 3, we were average, and then we caught the head of the Mujahideen Shura Council and the spiritual leader of Al-Qaeda for northern Iraq. And then we got redesignated as the Surge Strike Force the brigade did, and we were the kill capture force for northern Iraq and then for Baghdad. Started to get by name requests from division and ultimately ended up working with special missions units operators in British SAS, where we took down a vehicle bomb network that was killing about 1,000 people per month. And so they came to us and asked us to action that network. 2 weeks later, 9 of the top 10 that were on the list were gone, and the entire level of hierarchy underneath them. So my last moment with my guys as we were about to leave Iraq, I said, look, you'll never see the faces of the folks who weren't killed by the car bombs that didn't go off, but these folks were killing 1,000 people a month, and now that network no longer exists. And so leadership often isn't about what you don't control, but it's about making a positive impact with what you do. And certainly the situation in Iraq was far beyond what I had within my scope, but the discrete tasks that we were given, we were able to make an impact and to change the arc of people's lives and to make sure that innocent people didn't suffer. I think, when I came back, combat gave me a great gift as an entrepreneur. Life is precious and it's fleeting. Every day that goes by, you can't take it for granted. And when you do go, you can't take material things with you. The one thing that you can do is you can make a positive impact on other people's lives. And that for me as an entrepreneur is what I've now dedicated my life to with ID.me. And those same stories and principles and learning and the accomplishments from the military, Kelly Purdue, just like Colonel Huggins, who's right here in the front row, he took a chance on me when I had no idea what I was doing. Similar to Colonel Huggins, I had no idea what it meant to be a recon platoon leader. And he had no business taking his time and spending it on me, but he did. And there was a moment, ID.me started as troop swap. So you talk about getting better over time and sucking at the beginning. We really sucked at the beginning, just like we did over in Iraq. Today we're worth about $2 billion. We have 116 million users. We have 7 states that credited us with stopping over $270 billion worth of fraud during the pandemic. That's remarkable, but it only happens because Kelly decided that he was going to take the time to lead and inspire me. There was actually a moment in 2011 where I looked at him and I said, or as we're on the phone, I said, Kelly, I don't think this is going to work out. And he said, first, never tell that to anyone ever again, especially not investors, because they're not going to want to write a check after they hear that from you. And he said, chin up, we're going to figure it out. And so I'm really grateful to you, Kelly, for your leadership and for inspiring me. And if I can leave you with one thing as we break here, it's that we are all works in progress. We are messy, we are imperfect, we're beautiful, just like our country. America's values are perfect. Our history isn't. The point is that we live life one way, and that's forward, and it's worth fighting for and making tomorrow better than today. And in this room of investors and entrepreneurs, we have folks who are committed to doing exactly that. And our country needs it now more than ever. And I really appreciate the time you took to listen to me.